My father measured worth in heavy business cards and firm handshakes, telling me at every family dinner that my tech company was just a cute hobby nobody had ever heard of. I almost believed him. Then I walked into my lobby on a gray Tuesday and froze. He was standing at the reception desk, not as my dad, but as an auditor for a firm hired to tear my life apart. Suddenly, he knew exactly who we were. 4:30 in the morning was the only time Chicago felt like it belonged to me. The city was a bruised shade of purple outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment. Silent except for the distant, rhythmic hum of the highway. I did not need an alarm. I woke up because my body knew the stakes. I sat up in bed, the sheets cold against my legs, and reached for my phone before I even turned on the lamp. The screen light was harsh, stinging my eyes, but I forced myself to focus on the numbers. The daily active user count was stable. The latency logs were green. But there was a flag on the server cluster we dedicated to our enterprise clients. A tiny yellow warning triangle that had not been there 6 hours ago. I tapped it. Packet loss on the API gateway, 0.2%. It was negligible to anyone who did not know how fragile trust was in the compliance technology sector. To me, it looked like a crack in a windshield. I got out of bed, my feet finding the hardwood floor, and walked to the kitchen to start the coffee. My name is Kennedy Price. I am 33 years old. I am the CEO of Alder & Wren Systems, a company I built from a laptop in a sublet studio into a firm that processed billions of dollars in vendor risk assessments for regional banks. And today was the day I had to prove we were worth keeping. The Redwood Harbor Bank renewal was in 3 weeks. They were our whale. They accounted for 35% of our recurring revenue. If Redwood walked, we would not just lose a client. We would lose our signal to the market that we were ready for the big leagues. I poured the coffee, black, and opened my laptop on the quartz island. My inbox was already bleeding red. The first email was from Ben, my lead back-end engineer. The subject line was simply, resignation. I stared at the word. Ben had been with me since the days when we could not afford chairs. He wrote that he had been offered a package at Google that he could not turn down. He said he was sorry. He said his last day would be in 2 weeks. I closed my eyes and took a breath that rattled in my chest. 2 weeks meant he would be gone before the Redwood renewal was signed. It meant I had to hide his departure from the client, or risk them thinking our infrastructure was crumbling. I did not reply immediately. I drank the hot coffee and swallowed the panic. Panic was a luxury for people who had safety nets. I had investors, 40 employees, and a lease on a floor in the Loop that cost more than my father made in 3 years. I opened Slack. There were 4 new support tickets from Redwood's internal team. They were complaining about a slow dashboard load time. The yellow warning triangle I had seen earlier was bleeding into their user experience. I started typing a message to my CTO, even though I knew he was still asleep. We need to flush the cache on the primary nodes. I typed, and Ben just quit. Call me when you are up. I showered in the dark, the water scalding hot. I dressed in my armor, a navy blazer, tailored sharp at the shoulders, a silk blouse, heels that clicked with authority on polished concrete. When I looked in the mirror, I did not look like a woman whose lead engineer had just bailed or whose biggest client was submitting support tickets at dawn. I looked like a CEO. That was the job. The job was the mask. I drove out to the suburbs that evening because I had promised my mother I would. It was her sister's birthday, and the Price family gathered for these things with a religious intensity. The drive from the city to the sprawling, lawn-heavy subdivision where I grew up took an hour. It was an hour of transition, peeling off the CEO skin and putting on the daughter skin. The daughter skin was tighter. It itched. The house smelled of pot roast and heavy perfume. My aunt was holding court in the living room, but the gravity of the room, as always, centered on my father. Tom Price was standing by the fireplace, a scotch in one hand, gesturing broadly with the other. He was 62, with a full head of silver hair and the kind of booming a salesman laugh that made strangers trust him instantly. He had spent 40 years selling commercial insurance, then consulting, then strategic partnerships. He sold relationships. He sold the idea that he was the guy you needed to know. He saw me walk in and grinned. "There she is," he announced, his voice carrying over the conversation. The tech mogul. He did not mean it. The word mogul dripped with irony, the same way he used to say princess when I was 6. "Hi, Dad," I said, leaning in to kiss his cheek. He smelled of Old Spice and expensive tobacco. "We were just talking about Gary's boy," Tom said, keeping his arm around my shoulder, heavy and claiming. "He just made VP at Chase, real office, benefits, the whole 9 yards. That is great for him," I said, keeping my smile fixed. My dad turned to the room. "Kennedy here is still playing with her little app. What is it called again? Honey? Bird and Bush? Alder and Wren?" I said, "It is enterprise software." "Dad, not an app." Right, he said, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "Systems. Very fancy. But you know what I always say, if you cannot explain it to your grandmother, is it really a business?" My aunt laughed. I felt the heat rise up my neck, a familiar, suffocating flush. "We have 40 employees. Dad," I said, my voice quiet. "We just cleared $5 million in revenue last year." He tightened his grip on my shoulder, a squeeze that was meant to be affectionate but felt like a warning. "Revenue is not profit, sweetheart," he said, winking at my uncle. "And let us be honest, nobody has heard of your company. I asked the guys at the club yesterday." Blank stares. "You are building castles in the cloud. You need something solid. Bricks and mortar. A name people trust." I pulled away gently, pretending I needed a drink. "It is a business-to-business platform," I said, moving toward the kitchen. "The general public is not supposed to hear of it." He laughed again, louder this time. "If you say so." He called after me. "Just do not come crying to me when the internet bubble pops again. I told you. Halberg Partners is hiring. I could get you an interview, get you a real job with a 401k. I poured myself a glass of water in the kitchen, my hand shaking. I gripped the granite counter. I was 33 years old. I had negotiated contracts with general counsels of Fortune 500 companies. I had fired people twice my age. I had stared down venture capitalists who told me a woman could not run a compliance firm. But in this kitchen, I was 12 years old, and I was failing. I drove home in silence. The highway was a ribbon of red taillights. I felt humiliated, which made me angry, because I should have been immune to him by now. Why did I still want him to look at me and see what I actually was? Why did I need him to say, "Good job, Kennedy"? I pulled into my garage and sat in the car with the engine running. I pulled out my phone. I opened my drafts folder. There was an email there I had started writing 3 years ago. It had no subject line. "Dad, I need you to stop speaking to me like I'm a child. I employ people who have families. I protect banks from losing millions of dollars in fines. I am not playing. I am working harder than you ever have." I read it. I deleted a sentence. I retyped it. Then I deleted the whole thing, just like I always did. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and worked until 2 in the morning. I answered every support ticket myself. I reviewed the code logs. I fixed the cache issue. I worked until my eyes burned, trying to build a wall of competence so high that his voice could not climb over it. The next morning, the air in the office was wrong. I felt it the moment I stepped out of the elevator on the 12th floor. Usually, the lobby of Alder and Wren was a quiet, focused space. We had polished concrete floors, mid-century modern furniture, and a wall of living moss that cost a fortune to maintain but impressed the clients. Today, the receptionist, Sarah, was standing up behind her desk. She looked pale. "Kennedy," she said, her voice high, "I tried to text you." "They are already here." "Who is here?" I asked, switching my bag to my other shoulder. "The auditors," she said, "from Halberg Partners. They said they have a 9 o'clock, but they showed up at 7:30. They asked for a conference room and the network topography maps." I frowned. Halberg Partners? We did not have an audit scheduled with Halberg. We were audited by our clients, sure, but usually, that was a coordinated dance. Weeks of scheduling and scope agreements, Who sent them? I asked. Sarah swallowed. She looked past me, toward the glass-walled conference room near the kitchen. They said they are here on behalf of Redwood Harbor Bank, she whispered. My stomach dropped. Redwood. They had sent a third-party audit team without telling me? That was aggressive. That was hostile. I turned toward the conference room. I will handle it, I said, smoothing the front of my blazer. Get me the coffee. Sarah, the good stuff. I walked across the lobby. Through the glass, I could see 3 men. 2 were young, wearing ill-fitting suits, tapping on laptops. One was older, standing with his back to me, looking at the architectural diagrams we had framed on the wall. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked expensive. I pushed open the heavy glass door. Good morning, I said, my voice projecting that practiced executive calm. I am Kennedy Price, the CEO. I believe there has been some miscommunication about the schedule, but the man in the charcoal suit turned around. The words died in my throat. The air left the room. It was my father. Tom Price was standing in my conference room. He was wearing a visitor badge with my company logo on it clipped to his lapel. He was holding a styrofoam cup of our free office coffee. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes widened, darting from my face to the logo on the wall, then back to me. He looked like a man who had walked into the wrong funeral. Dad? The word fell out of my mouth before I could stop it. The 2 young men at the table looked up. Confused, my father recovered first. He blinked, swallowed, and then that salesman grin plastered itself onto his face. It was tight, though it did not reach his eyes. Kennedy, he said. His voice was too loud in the acoustic quiet of the room. Well, small world. I stood frozen in the doorway. My mind was racing, trying to calculate the odds. Halberg Partners. He had mentioned them at dinner. He had said he was working on a big project. He had said, nobody has heard of your company. He had not known. He had been assigned to audit a vendor for a client. And he had not known the vendor was me because he never listened when I talked about my work. I looked at the 2 young associates. They were watching us, sensing the weird frequency in the air. I straightened my spine. I could not let this be a family reunion. I could not let my staff see me crumble. Mr. Price, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming cool and professional. I was not aware you were on the engagement team for Redwood. Tom cleared his throat. He shifted his weight. He looked uncomfortable, which was a look I had never seen on him in a boardroom. I am the senior engagement lead, he said. These are my associates, Davis and Miller. He gestured to the boys. They nodded, looking terrified. We are here to conduct the vendor risk assessment, Tom said. Standard procedure for Redwood's key partners. I stepped fully into the room and let the door close behind me. The latch clicked like a gunshot. Standard procedure, I repeated. Usually, Redwood notifies us before deploying a third-party audit team, and usually, they do not ask for network topography before the opening meeting. Tom stepped forward. He tried to put his hand on my shoulder, the way he had at the party, but I took a subtle half-step back. His hand hovered in the air, then dropped. Kennedy, he said, lowering his voice. Look, I did not know this was your shop. The paperwork just said Alder and Wren. I thought it was a landscaping company or something. He laughed, a nervous, dry chuckle. I stared at him. You thought Redwood Harbor Bank hired a landscaping company to manage their vendor compliance? I asked. He flushed. I just mean, I did not make the connection. He said, but hey, this is good. It is family. We will get through this quick. Just give the boys what they need, and we will be out of your hair. He turned to the associate named Davis. Tell her what we need. Son? Davis opened a folder. He did not look at me. He looked at his notes. We require full read access to your source code repository, he said. We need the unredacted incident logs for the last 24 months. We need the personnel files for anyone with admin access to the production environment. And we need to interview your CISO and your CTO separately. I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. That is not a standard audit. I said, That is a forensic investigation. I looked at my father. Why is Redwood asking for source code access? I asked. That is intellectual property. We do not grant that. Ever. Tom shrugged. He buttoned his jacket. He was retreating into his role now. The embarrassment was fading. Replaced by the arrogance of a man who had a job to do and a badge that gave him power, the client has concerns. Kennedy, he said, they are worried about stability. They are worried about maturity. They want to know if this is a real operation or if it is held together with duct tape. Maturity. The word hit me like a slap. This is a SOC 2 Type 2 certified company, I said, my voice hard. We are audited annually by Deloitte. Our controls are platinum standard. Tom waved his hand. Deloitte checks boxes, he said. Halberg checks reality. Look, if you have nothing to hide, it should not be a problem. Just open the books. He checked his watch. We have a kickoff call with Redwood's procurement team in an hour. Marla Keene, you know her? I narrowed my eyes. Marla Keene was the new VP of procurement at Redwood. I had never met her. I know of her. I said, great. Tom said, she is a sharp lady. She wants a full report by Friday. So, let us not waste time arguing about access. Just sign the release. He slid a piece of paper across the mahogany table toward me. It was a data access authorization form. It was broad. It was dangerous. If I signed it, I was giving them the keys to everything. If I did not sign it, he would tell Marla Keene I was being obstructionist. I looked at the pen he offered me. It was a cheap plastic one from his pocket. I will have my general counsel review this, I said. Tom sighed. He rolled his eyes. A gesture so familiar it made my teeth ache. Come on. Kennedy, he said. Do not be difficult. It is me. I am not going to steal your code. I would not even know what to do with it. That is exactly why I'm not giving it to you. I said. I turned to the door. I will schedule a proper kickoff meeting for 2 o'clock. I said. Until then, you are welcome to wait in the lobby, but no one touches my network until my lawyer says yes. I walked out. I did not look back. I marched straight to my office, closed the door, and lowered the blinds. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I sat in my chair and stared at the wall. This was not a coincidence. Halberg Partners was a fixer firm. Companies hired them when they wanted to fire a vendor but needed a cause. They were hired to find dirt, to find risk, to create a paper trail that justified a termination. Redwood was trying to fire us, and they had sent my father to pull the trigger. The day was a blur of damage control. I spent 3 hours with our legal counsel, drafting a limited scope agreement. I spent 2 hours with my CTO, explaining that we were under siege but not telling him the auditors were related to me. I watched my father from a distance. He set up camp in the conference room. I saw him laughing with my operations manager, charming her. I saw him walking the halls, looking at our server racks through the glass, taking notes on a yellow pad. He looked like he owned the place. He looked like he finally believed I had a job, now that he was here to destroy it. At 6 o'clock, the office began to clear out. I stayed. I sat in the dark of my office, the city lights coming on outside. I opened my email. I typed a message to the entire leadership team. Subject, Audit Update Team. We are undergoing an unscheduled enhanced risk review requested by Redwood Harbor Bank. This is a high-priority exercise, but it is manageable. Please direct all requests for information to legal. Do not provide direct access to systems without my written approval. We have nothing to hide, but we will follow protocol. Stay focused. Kennedy. I hit send. It sounded calm. It sounded in control. My phone buzzed on the desk. I looked at the screen. It was a text message. Dad. I stared at it. The preview message popped up. We need to talk. This is not looking good. Kiddo. I felt a surge of nausea. Not looking good. He had been here for 8 hours. He had seen nothing but clean logs and professional staff. If he thought it was not looking good, it was because he had arrived with that conclusion already written in his pocket. I did not reply. I put the phone face down. I thought about the yellow warning triangle on the server. I thought about Ben quitting. I thought about Marla Keene, a woman I had never met. deciding my company lacked maturity. I realized then that the fight I had been preparing for my whole life, the fight to prove I was good enough, was no longer theoretical. It was sitting in my conference room, wearing my father's face. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the street, 30 stories below. He wanted to talk? No. He wanted to lecture. He wanted to explain to me why I was in over my head. He wanted to save me by telling me to quit. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. I am not going to let you win. I whispered to the empty room. I turned off the lights and walked out. I passed the conference room. It was empty now, but my father had left his jacket on the back of the chair, a placeholder, a flag planted in my soil. I walked past it and keyed into the elevator. The numbers counted down. 12, 11, 10. I was alone, and for the first time in my life. Being alone did not feel like a failure. It felt like a position of tactical advantage. I stepped out into the night air. It was freezing. It felt good. I hailed a cab. "Take me to the Loop," I said. I had work to do, and I was not going to let Tom Price or Redwood Harbor Bank or anyone else tear down the house I built. Not without a war. The war for my company did not begin with a shout. It began with a slow, suffocating constriction of paper. By Wednesday morning, I had turned my office into a fortress. I established a new protocol that I knew would drive the auditors insane. Every request from Hallberg Partners had to be submitted in writing through a dedicated ticketing portal. Every document release had to be approved by Marcus, my director of security, and then countersigned by legal. We were slowing the flow of information to a trickle, not because we had secrets, but because I needed to control the narrative. If I gave them a fire hose of data, they would find a way to drown us in it. The pushback was immediate. At 10 o'clock, I received an email from the Hallberg project lead, Tom's boss, a man named Sterling who had a handshake like a wet fish. Subject: Process obstruction. Ms. Price, the current approval workflow is creating unacceptable delays. Our mandate from Redwood Harbor Bank requires a velocity of assessment that your team is not meeting. We are beginning to get the impression that Alder and Wren is not being transparent. Transparency is a key metric of the risk score. Please advise. I read the email twice. I could hear the threat nestled in the polite corporate font. Not being transparent. That was the kill shot. In the compliance world, opacity was treated as guilt. I typed my reply. I did not apologize. Mr. Sterling, we are a security-first organization. Our data governance protocols apply to everyone, including external auditors. We are prioritizing accuracy over speed to ensure Redwood Harbor Bank receives verified data. We will continue to process requests as they are cleared by legal. I hit send. My hands were steady, but my jaw ached from clenching it. I walked out to the coffee station to refill my mug. The office was quiet. That tense, library silence that happens when people are afraid for their jobs. My employees knew something was wrong. They saw the suits in the conference room. They saw me pacing. I pressed the button for the espresso machine. The grinder whirred, loud and aggressive in the stillness. Going up? I turned. My father was standing by the elevators, holding a leather folio. He looked tired. The fluorescent lights of the hallway were not kind to him. They deepened the lines around his eyes. He was waiting for a car. But when he saw me, he stepped away from the buttons. I did not want to talk to him. I wanted to take my coffee and retreat to my glass box. But the elevator was slow, and the hallway was narrow. "Hi, Dad," I said. My voice was flat. He shifted his weight, looking at the floor, then at the ceiling, then finally at me. He looked like a man trying to find a comfortable place to stand on a rocking boat. "Kennedy, look," he started, "about yesterday." I watched the numbers on the elevator panel. 8, 9. "I did not know," he said. He sounded almost desperate for me to believe him. "I swear to you." When Sterling handed me the file, it just said Alder and Wren. I thought it was some boutique firm. I never put it together. I turned to face him fully. I was wearing 3-inch heels, which put me almost at eye level with him. "You thought it was a landscaping company." I said, "You said that already." It is just. He trailed off, waving his hand vaguely. We never talk about the details. At dinner, we talk about family. We talk about the weather. I did not know the name of your biggest client. I did not know you were in the middle of a renewal. The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Neither of us moved. That is the point. Isn't it? I said. He frowned. What is? I took a step toward him. You never ask about my company. Dad, you never have. For 7 years. I have been building this. I have been telling you about it. And every time I start, your eyes glaze over. You ask if I am making rent. You ask if I am dating anyone. You ask when I'm going to get a real job. Kennedy, do not do this, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I am not doing anything. I said, I am just stating a fact. You did not know because you did not care to know. Why would you know the name of the client? To you. This is just a little project I do in between asking you for advice I do not need. He flinched. It was small, a tightening of the corners of his mouth. But I saw it. I am trying to help you now, he said. No, I said. You are trying to help yourself. You are trying to figure out how to do your job without feeling guilty about the fact that your job is to destroy mine. I stepped into the elevator and turned around. He stood in the hallway, holding his leather folio like a shield. Do your job, Dad, I said as the doors started to close. Just do not expect me to make it easy for you. The doors shut, cutting off the sight of his bewildered face. I leaned my head against the metal wall and closed my eyes for 3 seconds. Then I straightened up. I had a company to save. I went straight to Lila Hart's office. Lila was my head of customer success and the only person in the world who knew where all the bodies were buried. We had been roommates in college. She was the one who held my hair back when I got food poisoning before my first investor pitch. She was fierce, loyal, and terrifyingly observant. She was sitting on her desk, not behind it, scrolling through something on her iPad. When I walked in, she looked up, and her expression was grim. Close the door, she said. I kicked the door shut with my heel. What is it? Lila turned the iPad toward me. I have a friend in procurement at a healthcare firm in financing, she said. They use the same recruiting headhunters as Redwood. She heard a rumor. I sat down in the guest chair. Rumors are just noise. Lila. I need Signal. This is Signal, she said. Marla Keene. The new VP at Redwood? I nodded. She was seen having dinner on Monday night with the VP of sales from Brightline Metric. Lila said, at Gibson's. Steak and wine on the corporate card. My stomach turned over. Brightline Metric. I knew them. Everyone in the industry knew them. They were the anti-Alder and Wren. We were built on precision, custom architecture, and obsessive support. Brightline was built on venture capital money, Super Bowl commercials, and a user interface that looked like a video game but had a back end made of spaghetti code. They were flashy, they were expensive, and they were famous for promising executives the moon and then delivering a rock. They are trying to poach the account. I said, they are not just trying. Lila said, Marla Keene used to work with the Brightline CEO at her last job. They go back 10 years. This is not a competitive bid. Kennedy, this is a handover. It made sense. It made perfect sense. Marla Keene comes in. She wants to bring in her old friends. But she cannot just fire a performing vendor like us without cause. It would look like cronyism. So she hires Halberg Partners to find a reason. She manufactures a risk assessment. She sends in the auditors to shake the tree until something falls out. And my father was the guy shaking the tree. If they switch to Brightline, I said, thinking aloud, they will pay 30% more for a product that does half as much. The security team at Redwood knows that. Security does not sign the checks. Lila said, procurement does. And if Marla Keene can convince the board that we are a risk, security will be overruled. I stood up and paced the small room. We need to prove the audit is biased. I said, we need to prove the fix is in. Lila hesitated. She looked down at her hands. Kennedy, she said, there is something else. What? I still talk to Marcus sometimes. Not our Marcus, Marcus Vane. The deputy security lead at Redwood. I stopped pacing. Lila and Marcus Vane had dated for 2 years. It had ended messily, with a lot of blocked numbers and returned hoodies. I thought you two were over. I said, we are, she said, but we are civil. He messaged me on LinkedIn this morning. He asked if we were okay. He said the mood over there is weird. Procurement is locking security out of meetings. He said he has never seen Marla Keene this aggressive. I looked at her. I hated back channels. I hated the idea of using personal history to get business intelligence. It felt dirty. It felt desperate. But I looked at the whiteboard behind Lila's desk where she tracked our customer satisfaction scores. They were perfect. We had done everything right. We had built a good thing, and they were trying to kill it with a steak dinner and a lie. Can you talk to him? I asked, quietly. Can you find out if they are actually coordinating with Brightline? Lila nodded slowly. I can try, she said. But Kennedy, if we go down this road, we are crossing a line. We are spying on our client. They are spying on us. I said, they sent my father into my lobby with a visitor badge. The line is already gone. The attack came at 11 that night. I was still at the office. I had sent most of the staff home, but the core engineering team was fueled by pizza and paranoia. Sitting in the open plan bullpen, I was in my office, reviewing legal drafts. My phone rang. It was Marcus, my director of security. Kennedy, look at the dashboard. Now, I dropped the papers and woke my laptop monitor. The main operations dashboard was flashing red. High-velocity login attempts. Thousands of them. What is happening? I asked, putting the phone on speaker. Credential stuffing attack, Marcus said, his voice calm but tight, coming from a distributed IP range. But here's the kicker. The IP's resolved to a hosting block used by one of our third-party integrations. It looks like it is coming from a trusted partner. Are they getting in? No, Marcus said. The WAF is blocking them. Zero penetration. But the volume is massive. It is tripping every alarm we have. Block the range. I said, hard block. Sever the integration if you have to. Already done, he said. But Kennedy, Redwood just emailed us. My blood ran cold. Redwood? I said. The attack started 3 minutes ago. I know, Marcus said. They sent a critical alert to our support queue. They claim they received an anonymous tip that Alder and Wren has been breached and that attacker traffic is bleeding into their tunnel. I stared at the screen. That is impossible, I said. There is no traffic in their tunnel. We blocked it at the edge. I know that, Marcus said. You know that. But they are saying they have a report. I hung up. I walked out into the bullpen. The engineers were typing furiously. The room smelled of stress and stale cheese. I stood in the center of the room. Listen to me, I said. My voice carried. We are under a coordinated stress test. This is not a random attack. Someone is generating noise to make us look unstable. Keep the blocks up. Document every packet. I want a forensic timeline of exactly when the traffic hit and exactly when Redwood emailed us. I went back to my office. My phone buzzed again. It was Tom. Kennedy. Sterling just called me. He says Redwood is reporting a breach. He is demanding emergency access to your incident response channel. He says if you do not grant it, he is recommending immediate suspension of the contract, out of caution. I held the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. There is no breach. Dad, I said, it is a failed login attempt. Our systems did exactly what they are supposed to do. Sterling does not care. Tom said, he is saying where there is smoke, there is fire. You need to let us in. Kennedy, if you lock us out now, you look guilty. I closed my eyes. They had set a trap. If I let them in, they would find the chaos of a midnight attack and put it in their report as instability. If I kept them out, they would call it obfuscation. I took a breath. Fine, I said. Kennedy, fine, I snapped. You want to see? Come and see. Bring Sterling. Bring the whole team. But tell them to bring their own laptops. Because they are not touching ours. 30 minutes later, the conference room was a war room. Sterling had arrived, looking rumpled but smug, wearing a trench coat over his pajamas. Tom was with him, wearing a tracksuit, looking terrified. I stood at the head of the table. I had plugged my laptop into the main projector. On the screen was a live visualization of our network traffic. It showed the attack vector, a thick red line of requests slamming into our firewall and bouncing off. "Gentlemen," I said. My voice was ice. "As you can see, at 2300 hours, we detected a brute force attempt against our external gateway." I pointed to the screen. Our automated defenses identified the pattern within 4 seconds. The IP range was blacklisted within 6 seconds. No data was exfiltrated. No sessions were compromised. The system held. Sterling squinted at the screen. "Redwood received a tip that you were leaking data," he said. I turned to him. "Redwood received a tip 3 minutes after the attack began." I said, "That is statistically impossible for a third-party observer unless the observer knew the attack was coming." Sterling stiffened. "Are you implying something, Ms. Price?" "I am implying that this was a staged event," I said, "designed to trigger a panic, and your presence here, demanding suspension before you have even seen the logs, suggests you are part of the panic." Sterling's face went red. "I am here to protect the client," he shouted. "Protect them from what?" I asked, my voice rising just enough to cut over his. "From a system that works? Look at the screen. Mr. Sterling. That is what competence looks like. We didn't panic. We defended." I looked at my father. He was sitting at the far end of the table, watching me. He was not looking at the screen. He was looking at my face. He had spent his life telling me I was playing business. He had told me I needed a real job. He had dismissed my work as invisible fluff. Now, he was watching me command a room of engineers and hostile auditors in the middle of the night. Dissecting a cyber attack with the precision of a surgeon, I saw something shift in his eyes. It was not pride, exactly. It was confusion. It was the realization that the map he had of his daughter was wrong. "Dad," I said, addressing him directly in front of his boss, "do you see any evidence of a breach?" Tom looked at Sterling, then at the screen, then at me. "No," he said quietly. The firewall held. Sterling glared at Tom. "We need to review the raw logs." Sterling snapped. "You will get them," I said, "in the morning. Scrubbed for PII, per our policy. Now, if you will excuse me, my team has work to do. Please leave my building." It was a gamble. Kicking out the auditors in the middle of a crisis was bold, but I saw the doubt in Tom's eyes, and I needed to leverage it. When they were gone, the adrenaline crashed. I sat down on the floor of my office, my back against the door. My CTO, David, came in a few minutes later. He was holding a printout. "Kennedy," he said. I looked up. "I am tired." "David, tell me good news." "It is weird news," he said. He handed me the paper. It was a side-by-side comparison of text. On the left was the official audit request from Halberg Partners, the document Sterling had sent over demanding specific architecture diagrams. On the right was a document I did not recognize immediately. "Look at the phrasing," David said. I read it. "Request for topography regarding legacy node clusters and asynchronous redundant backups." It was a clunky, specific phrase. Asynchronous redundant backups. No one said that anymore. It was bad grammar. "Where is the document on the right from?" I asked. "It is from an internal strategy memo we wrote 4 years ago." David said, "Before we migrated to the cloud, it was a draft. We never published it. It was on the old internal wiki." I stared at the paper. Halberg was using our own internal language to ask for things. Language that hadn't been used in years. That means someone gave it to them. I whispered, "Someone inside," David said, "or someone who has access to our old archives." I felt sick. A leak. It wasn't just Marla Keene and Brightline from the outside. Someone inside Alder and Wren was feeding them ammunition. The next day, the sun came up, but the darkness didn't leave the office. We had survived the night, but the atmosphere was poisonous. The team was whispering. People were looking at each other with suspicion. The truth file I had started was growing, but the emotional toll was mounting. I needed to see my father, not as an auditor, but as my father. I needed to know if he was truly a pawn, or if he was a player. I agreed to meet him for lunch. A neutral ground, a sandwich place around the corner. He looked terrible. He was wearing the same suit as the day before. He had clearly not slept. "Kennedy," he said as we sat down with our plastic trays. "That was intense last night." I took a bite of my salad. I did not taste it. "It is the job." "Dad," he shook his head. "You were tough. I will give you that." Sterling was furious. He hates being talked down to. He was wrong. I said, "Being right does not matter if you get fired." Tom said. He leaned across the table. His voice took on that familiar, paternal tone, the one that implied he knew how the world worked and I was just a tourist. "Look, honey, I am trying to help you navigate this. You are fighting them on every point. You are making enemies. I am defending my company." I said. "You are being abrasive," he said. I dropped my fork. It clattered on the plastic tray. "Abrasive?" I repeated. Tom nodded earnest. "You have to charm these guys. Kennedy, that is how the game is played. You catch more flies with honey. Smile at Sterling. Ask him about his golf game. Make him feel like he is the expert. If he likes you, he will soften the report." I stared at him. I was fighting a coordinated corporate sabotage campaign involving a corrupt procurement officer, a rival firm, a fabricated cyber attack, and an internal mole. And my father's advice was to smile. He truly did not see me. He saw a little girl playing dress-up who was getting cranky because the boys were playing rough. I am not failing because I am not likable. "Dad," I said. My voice was very quiet, but it cut through the noise of the deli. Tom blinked. "I did not say you were failing. You implied it." I said, "You think the solution to a technical audit is for me to be charming. You think my competence is secondary to my personality." "It helps," he insisted. "It is just human nature. I am not dealing with humans." I said, "I am dealing with a hit squad. And frankly, I am shocked that you, a man who prides himself on knowing how business works, cannot see that you are the weapon they are using to kill me." Tom sat back. He looked offended. "I am not a weapon," he said. "I am an objective observer. You are a distraction," I said. "They put you there because they knew it would mess with my head. They knew I would hesitate to kick you out. They knew I would waste energy trying to manage your feelings instead of managing the risk." I stood up. I picked up my bag. "Kennedy, sit down." Tom said, "People are looking. Let them look." I said. I leaned down, my hands on the table. "I am done playing defense, Dad, and I am done trying to get you to respect me. You can write whatever report you want. You can tell Sterling I am a nightmare, but I am going to save my company. And when I do not try to take credit for it." I walked out. The wind on the street hit my face, cold and biting. I felt a strange lightness. The hope was gone. The hope that he would help me. The hope that he would understand. It had evaporated in that booth. And without the hope, there was no fear of disappointment. There was only the work. I pulled out my phone and called Lila. "Kennedy?" She answered. "Do it." I said, "Do what?" "Call Marcus Vane. Use the back channel. I want to know exactly what Marla Keene is saying to the security team." "And Lila?" "Yeah?" "Tell the team to start a new folder in the drive. Call it the Truth File." "What goes in it?" she asked. "Everything." I said, "Every email from Halberg, every timestamp, the logs from the attack, the text comparison of the leak. We are going to build a binder." I hailed a cab, my hand raised high in the air. "If they want a review," I said, mostly to myself, "I am going to give them one they will never forget." I got in the cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Alder and Wren," I said. I was going back to the war. And this time, I wasn't waiting for them to shoot first. The paper trail is where the bodies are buried. That is the first rule of compliance, and it was the only thing keeping me sane as the week ground toward Thursday. My office had become a bunker. The blinds were drawn, the whiteboard was covered in timelines, IP addresses, and the names of people who were trying to kill my company. The air smelled of stale coffee and ozone. It was my general counsel, Peter, who found the first crack in the wall. He walked into my office at 8 in the morning, holding a sheaf of documents with yellow sticky notes flagging the edges. Peter was a man who did not believe in excitement if the building was on fire. He would draft a memo about the liability implications before evacuating, so when I saw his tie was slightly crooked, I knew it was serious. "Kennedy," he said, closing the door behind him. "I have been reviewing the master service agreement with Redwood, specifically, the amendments filed in the last quarter." I rubbed my temples. "We haven't filed any amendments in the last quarter." "Peter, the renewal is not until next month." "We didn't," he said. "They did. Or rather, their procurement department did." He slid a document across my desk. It was a standard vendor addendum, dense with legalese. He tapped a paragraph on the third page. "Read Clause 14B. He said. I leaned in. "Expanded vendor reassessment protocols. In the event of a credible anonymous report regarding data integrity, the client reserves the right to initiate immediate third-party audit procedures. Suspension of services may be enacted prior to verification if the risk profile exceeds tolerance." I looked up at him. "That is a kill switch." I said, "It gets worse." Peter said, "Look at the signature block." I turned to the last page. There was only one signature on the Redwood side. Marla Keene, VP of Procurement. "Where is the General Counsel's signature?" I asked. "Where is the Chief Risk Officer?" "That is just it." Peter said, "They are not there. Usually. An amendment that changes the termination logic requires a countersign from legal. Marla Keene signed this unilaterally 3 weeks ago." I sat back, the paper feeling heavy in my hand. 3 weeks ago, before the audit, before the anonymous tip. "She built the trap door," I said, my voice quiet. Then she walked over and pulled the lever. She bypassed her own internal checks. Peter said, "She created a localized authority to fire us without needing board approval, as long as there is an anonymous report, and then she manufactured the report." I said. I looked at the whiteboard. The timeline was becoming clear. Marla Keene arrives at Redwood. She signs this amendment. She hires Halberg Partners. Then, coincidentally, a ghost attack hits our servers, and an anonymous email lands in her inbox. It was not just sabotage, it was a coup. "I need to know if the bank knows." I said, "Does Redwood's general counsel know Marla is rewriting their contracts?" "I doubt it." Peter said, "But if we ask, we tip our hand." "Not yet." I said, "We need more than a clause. We need the whole chain." I spent the next 2 hours dissecting the requests coming from Halberg. Now that I knew the game, the pattern was impossible to miss. Every time Sterling, the Halberg lead, raised a red flag, it was based on data that was slightly off. He flagged a vulnerability in our encryption library. When I checked the screenshot he included, the timestamp was from 18 months ago. It was a screenshot of a version we had deprecated last year. He flagged a missing compliance certificate for our data center. When I checked the file he referenced, it was a draft PDF, not the final signed copy we had submitted to the portal. They were not finding problems. They were building a collage of failures out of old scraps. I was staring at a monitor, comparing 2 file hashes. When my door opened, I did not look up. Knock, knock. It was my father. He stood in the doorway, holding 2 coffees. He looked worse than he had yesterday. His suit was wrinkled at the elbows. The bounce was gone from his step. "I brought a peace offering," he said, holding up a cup. "Hazelnut, your favorite." I have not drank hazelnut coffee since I was 19. "Dad," I said, "but thank you." He set the cup on the edge of my desk. He did not sit down. He looked at the whiteboard, at the frantic scrawl of notes. "You look like you are hunting the Zodiac killer," he said. Trying to joke, "I am hunting a liar." I said. Tom winced. He put his hands in his pockets. "Kennedy, listen. I know you are angry. I know you think we are being unfair. I do not think you are being unfair," I said, typing a command into my terminal. "I think you are being manipulated. There is a difference. Sterling is breathing down my neck." Tom said, He wants the draft report by Friday. He is pushing for a high-risk designation. I stopped typing. I turned my chair to face him. And what are you going to give him? I asked. Tom looked at his shoes. I'm trying to soften it. He said, I really am. I told him the team is capable. I told him the incident response was solid, but Kennedy, the data he is giving me, it looks bad. The missing certificates, the encryption holes, those are fake. Dad, I said, they are old versions. Sterling is curating the evidence to fit a conclusion he already wrote. Tom sighed. He ran a hand through his silver hair. Look, maybe that is true. Maybe it is not. But in my world, perception is reality. If the client thinks you are risky, you are risky. He took a step closer to the desk. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I can make a call, he said. I narrowed my eyes. What? I know a guy on the Redwood board. Tom said. Played golf with him for years. I could make a call. Deeply off the record. Tell him you are a good kid. Tell him this audit is a bit heavy-handed. Call in a favor. I stared at him. He was offering to save me. But he was offering to save me the way you save a drowning child. By pulling strings. By using the old boy network. By admitting that I could not survive on my own merits. If he made that call, the narrative would be set forever. Kennedy Price survived because her daddy knew a guy. No, I said. Kennedy, be reasonable. No, I repeated, my voice hard. I do not want a favor. Dad, I want you to look at the timestamps on the screenshots Sterling gave you. I want you to do your actual job. I do not need you to pull strings. I continued. Standing up, I need you to look at the facts. If you can't do that, then get out of my office. Tom stiffened. He looked hurt. He looked like I had slapped his hand away when he was trying to feed me. I am just trying to help you survive, he said. You are too proud for your own good. I am not proud. I said, I am right. He turned and walked out, leaving the hazelnut coffee steaming on the desk. It smelled cloying and sweet, like a childhood I had outgrown. 10 minutes later, Lila slipped into the room. She looked like she had just run a marathon. I talked to Marcus, she said, keeping her voice low. And he is furious, she said. The security team at Redwood never flagged us. They love us. Our API is the most stable thing they plug into. When the anonymous tip came in, Marcus investigated it himself. He told Marla there was zero evidence of a breach. What did she do? I asked. She told him to stay in his lane. Lila said. She told him that vendor risk is a procurement function, not a technical one. She effectively gagged the security team. They are not allowed to talk to Halberg. All communication has to go through her office. I nodded. It fit. She was siloing the experts so the lie could breathe. Did Marcus say anything else? Lila hesitated. He said Marla has a nickname for you. She said, I waited. She calls it the sorority house. Lila said, whenever she talks about Alder and Wren, she asks if the sorority girls have figured out how to run a server yet. I felt a cold, sharp point of anger press against my ribs. It was not the heat of rage. It was the absolute zero of focus. Get me a meeting with her. I said, Kennedy, she is dodging us. I do not care. Tell her I'm coming to her office. Tell her if she refuses to see me, I will file a formal obstruction complaint with the bank's ethics hotline. I want to look her in the eye. The meeting was set for 2 o'clock at Redwood's headquarters. I took the train. I did not want to drive. I needed the 20 minutes to clear my head, to rehearse the calm mask I had to wear. Redwood Harbor Bank was housed in a glass monolith on Wacker Drive. The lobby was all marble and hushed tones. I checked in at security. The guard looked at my ID, then at a list. Ms. Price, he said, you are going up to the 42nd floor. Procurement. The elevator ride was smooth and silent. My ears popped. Marla Keene's office was in the corner. Overlooking the river, it was designed to intimidate. The furniture was stark, white leather and chrome. There were no personal photos, no clutter, just efficiency. Marla was sitting behind a desk that looked like a slab of ice. She was perhaps 50, with a bob cut so sharp it could cut glass and glasses with thick black frames. She did not stand up when I walked in. "Ms. Price," she said. She gestured vaguely to a chair. "Marla," I said, "thank you for making the time." She smiled. It was a tight, predatory thing. "I have 5 minutes," she said. "I am in the middle of a transition strategy session." Transition strategy? She was not even hiding it. "I am here to discuss the audit," I said, sitting down. "And the anomalies in the requests we are receiving." Marla sighed. She took off her glasses and cleaned them with a microfiber cloth. "Anomalies," she repeated. "You know, Kennedy. Can I call you Kennedy?" "Ms. Price is fine." I said, "Kennedy," she continued, ignoring me. "This is exactly the problem. You view standard governance as an anomaly. You view questions as attacks. It is a very youthful reaction." She put the glasses back on. "We are a regional bank, Kennedy. We manage billions in assets. We need partners who offer adult supervision. Not founder chaos, founder chaos." I kept my face perfectly still. "Our uptime is 99.9%, I said. "Our security rating is perfect. We have never missed a deliverable. That is technical performance," Marla said, waving her hand. "I am talking about maturity, vendor stability. When I look at Alder and Wren, I see a cult of personality. I see a company that runs on adrenaline, Brightline metric, for example. They have scale. They have depth. They do not rely on one person's ego to keep the lights on." She leaned forward. "Frankly, Kennedy, I think you are in over your head, and I think your father knows it, too." The air in the room stopped moving. "Excuse me?" I said. Marla smiled again. This time it was genuine. She was enjoying this. "Tom," she said. "He is a charming man. We had a lovely chat this morning. He seems very concerned about your stress levels. He mentioned that you take things very personally, that you have always been emotional." She let the word hang there. Emotional. It was a masterstroke. She had taken my father's clumsy attempts to help and weaponized them. She had mined him for psychological ammo. "He is trying to protect you." Marla said, "Maybe you should listen to him. Maybe it is time to let the adults handle the infrastructure." I stood up. My legs felt numb. But I stood. "This audit is a sham." "Marla," I said. My voice was low and steady. "You are feeding Halberg altered documents. You signed an amendment to bypass your own legal counsel, and you are coordinating with a competitor." Marla laughed, a dry, rasping sound. "Those are big accusations." "Honey," she said, "I hope you have proof, because if you come at me with conspiracy theories, you will just prove my point, that you are a hysterical little girl who cannot handle the big leagues." I walked out. I did not slam the door. I closed it gently. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. When the doors closed, I leaned against the back wall and slid down until I was crouching on the floor. I wrapped my arms around my knees. "Hysterical, little girl. Emotional. Nobody has heard of your company. Get a real job." Marla's voice and my father's voice were blending into a single, deafening chorus. They were the same person. They were the gatekeepers. The people who decided who mattered and who didn't. And the worst part, the part that made me want to scream, was that I wanted my dad. I wanted him to be the father he was in my head when I was 5. The one who would storm into that office and tell Marla Keene to go to hell. I wanted him to defend me, but he wouldn't. He was feeding her the lines. He was the one telling her I was emotional. I hated him for it, and I hated myself for still needing him. I wiped my face. I stood up. The elevator chimed at the lobby. I walked out, past the security guard, past the marble. I was not hysterical. I was not a little girl. I was a CEO, and I was going to burn their house down. I went back to the office. I did not go to my room. I went to the server room, the physical heart of the company. It was cold in there, loud with the drone of fans. Marcus, my security director, was there. He was sitting on a crate, a laptop on his knees. "Kennedy," he said, "you need to see this." He turned the screen toward me. "We traced the login attempts from the ghost attack," he said. I looked at the strings of data. They used a dictionary attack, Marcus explained. But look at the usernames they tried. I read the list. J. Smith, M. Jones, L. Hart, K. Price. They are close. I said, they are too close. Marcus said, they are variations of our actual employee directory. But here's the catch. These specific variations, J. Smith instead of John Smith, we only used those naming conventions in the dev environment 3 years ago. I stared at him. Someone who had access to our old dev environment gave them the list. I said, Marcus nodded, or someone who stole a backup of our old Active Directory. He typed a command, but that is not the smoking gun. He said, the anonymous email that tipped off Redwood? The one that claimed we were breached? Yeah? I traced the header. Marcus said, it came from a domain called https://google.com/search $Q equals watchdog-intel-group.com. Sounds official, right? He brought up a WHOIS record. The domain was registered 2 months ago. He said, by an LLC in Delaware. Anonymous registration. But they made a mistake. They used a recovery email address for the admin contact. He pointed to the line. Admin prism-communications.net. I do not know that name. I said, I did. Marcus said, Prism Communications is a boutique PR firm, Their biggest client? I felt the answer before he said it. Brightline Metric. I whispered. Brightline hired a PR firm to register a fake whistleblower domain. I said, to send a fake tip about a fake breach. It is corporate espionage. Marcus said, it is fraud. It is enough. I said. I took the laptop from him. Print it. I said, print everything. I needed air. I walked out of the server room and headed toward the break room to get water. My head was pounding. The break room shared a thin wall with the conference room where the Halberg team was squatting. The ventilation grates carried sound if you stood in the right spot. I was filling my cup when I heard voices. Laughter. I froze. Literally run by children. A male voice said, I think it was Davis, the young associate. Did you see her face when we asked for the logs? She looked like she was going to cry. Another voice laughed. It is a cute startup. Man, they have beanbag chairs. What do you expect? It is basically a daycare with servers. I gripped the paper cup. I wanted to crush it. Then I heard a third voice. Deeper. Older. Shut up. It was Tom. The laughter died instantly. What? Davis asked. I said shut up. Tom snapped. His voice was shaking. I have heard enough. Whoa. Tom, Davis said. We are just blowing off steam. Sterling said. I do not care what Sterling said. Tom interrupted. The sound of a chair scraping against the floor. You do not know what you are talking about. Tom said. His voice was rising. You think this is a daycare? I have been watching them for 3 days. These kids are working 18-hour shifts. Their documentation is better than anything I saw at Chase last year. There was a silence. Tom continued, his voice thick with something that sounded like shame. She built this, he said, from nothing. Do you know how hard that is? You two sit here with your templates and your checklists, tearing it down because you were told to. But you could not build a lemonade stand, let alone a company like this. Tom, Davis warned. So do not call it cute. Tom spat. And do not call her a child. She is twice the professional you are. I stood next to the water cooler, my hand over my mouth. Tears pricked my eyes. Hot and sudden, he had defended me, for the first time in my life. Behind my back, when it mattered, he had stood up. Then I heard the door to the conference room open. Price, a new voice said. Sterling. I could hear Sterling walking into the room. Is there a problem here? Sterling asked. Tom's voice was quieter now, controlled. No problem. Just correcting the team's perspective. Sterling's voice was cold. Careful. Tom. You are sounding biased. Remember who signs the checks. We have a narrative to maintain. If you cannot stay objective, maybe you should go home. There was a long pause. I am objective, Tom said. I am just looking at the facts. The facts are what we say they are, Sterling said. Now get back to work. And Tom? Yeah? Marla Keene wants the draft by 5. Do not disappoint her. I heard the door close. I stood there for another minute, listening to the silence. My father was trapped. He saw the truth now. He saw the quality of my work, and he saw the ugliness of his own masters. But he was paralyzed by his paycheck, by his fear of losing his status, by the real job he worshipped. He had defended me to the associates. But he had folded to Sterling. He was not going to save me. He couldn't. He was a cog in the machine that was crushing us. But knowing he had seen me, really seen me, even for a second, gave me something I hadn't realized I was missing. Closure. I did not need to prove myself to him anymore. He knew. Now, I just had to win. I walked back to my office. I called Peter, my general counsel. I called Marcus. I called Lila. Come in here, I said. They gathered around my desk. They looked exhausted, scared. We are done reacting. I said, I pulled up a blank email. I typed the recipients. To Marla Keene, Redwood. C. General Counsel, Redwood. Chief Risk Officer, Redwood. Director of Security, Redwood. Subject, Formal Joint Review of Vendor Risk Assessment. What are you doing? Peter asked, his eyes widening. I am lighting a flare. I said, I typed the body. Given the discrepancies in the ongoing audit and the conflicting data regarding the alleged security breach, Alder and Wren Systems formally requests a joint session with the Risk Committee to present our internal forensic findings. We believe the current assessment process has been compromised by inaccurate data and potential conflicts of interest. We are prepared to present evidence to the full board. This meeting is non-negotiable prior to any termination decision. Kennedy, Peter said, if you send that, you are declaring war on procurement. Marla will go nuclear. She already went nuclear. I said, she just did it in the dark. I am dragging her out into the sunlight. I looked at the send button. I thought about the truth file. I thought about the shell company. I thought about my father's voice saying, she is twice the professional you are. I hit send. I am not a little girl. I whispered. I looked at my team. Get the conference room ready. I said, and print everything. We are going to trial. The next 48 hours were not measured in hours. They were measured in caffeine, printer toner, and the cold, metallic taste of adrenaline. My office had ceased to be a place of business and had become a bunker. The truth file was no longer just a folder. It was 3 3-ring binders, color-coded and tabbed, sitting on the center of the conference table like a holy text. Binder 1. The technical baseline. This contained our uptime logs for the last 24 months, signed affidavits from our third-party hosting providers, and the raw data from the ghost attack showing the IP blocks and the failed login attempts. Binder 2. The procedural anomalies. This was the dangerous one. It contained the side-by-side comparisons of the Halberg audit requests against our old internal strategy documents. It showed the pattern of manufactured evidence. It documented the timeline of the anonymous tip relative to the procurement amendment Marla Keene had signed. Binder 3. The external validation. This was the one that cost me $20,000 in rush fees. I had hired a private cybersecurity firm, a group of white-hat hackers called Ironclad, to conduct a gray box penetration test of our entire system. I gave them 48 hours to break in. I gave them carte blanche. If there was a hole, I needed them to find it before Halberg did. It was Friday morning. The office hummed with a terrified energy. My engineers were walking on eggshells. They knew we were at war, but they did not know the enemy was sitting in the glass-walled conference room down the hall, eating our bagels and drafting our death warrant. I was staring at the draft of the executive summary when my phone rang. It was Arthur Vance, the general counsel of Redwood Harbor Bank. I signaled for everyone to leave the room. Lila ushered the junior analysts out and closed the door. Mr. Vance, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Thank you for taking the call. Ms. Price, Vance said. His voice was dry, papery. the sound of a man who had spent 30 years preventing people from doing things. "I received your letter, and? It is aggressive," he said. "Formally requesting a joint session with the risk committee while an audit is active? That is highly irregular. The audit is irregular." "Arthur," I said. I used his first name. "A calculated risk. We have evidence that the process has been compromised. If I wait for the final report to be filed, the narrative will be set. I need to present our findings concurrently." Vance was silent for a long moment. I could hear him tapping a pen against his desk. "Kennedy," he said, his tone shifting. He sounded tired. "You need to understand the landscape here. The bank is split. Procurement, Marla's team, is pushing hard for a vendor consolidation. They want Brightline. They have the numbers to support it, at least on paper. They are fake numbers." I said, "That remains to be seen." Vance said, "But security, Marcus Vane and his people, they are backing you. They say you are the best operator we have, so we have a civil war brewing. That is why I need the meeting," I said, "to settle it." "Settle." "I will grant the meeting," Vance said. "Monday morning, 9 o'clock. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet," he warned. "The risk committee does not like surprises. They do not like drama. And frankly, Kennedy, you have a reputation in this building right now." "A reputation?" "The word from procurement is that you are volatile," Vance said, "that you are taking this business review personally. If you walk into that room and raise your voice, or if you start throwing around accusations without absolute ironclad proof, they will write you off as emotional, and then they will fire you." I gripped the phone. Emotional. The label again. The universal silencer for women who stood their ground. "I will be precise." "Arthur," I said. "You better be," he said, "because Marla Keene will be there, and she is very good at staying calm while she cuts someone's throat." I hung up. I stared at the black screen of the phone. Monday, 3 days. I walked out of my office and went to the break room to get water. I felt hollowed out. The warning from Vance was rattling around in my skull. Volatile. Emotional. I was filling my bottle when the door opened. Tom walked in. He looked haggard. The crisp consultant veneer was cracking. His tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He saw me and stopped. "Kennedy," he said. I screwed the cap back on my bottle. "Hello, Dad?" He looked at the door to make sure it was closed, then stepped closer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here," he said, holding it out. "What is this?" "It is Sterling's notes," he whispered, "from the morning sink. It outlines the key findings they are going to present on Monday." I looked at the paper. It was a cheat sheet. If I took it, I would know exactly where they were going to hit me. I could prepare perfect defenses. I did not take it. I put my hands behind my back. "I do not want it." I said, "Kennedy, take it," he hissed. "They are going to say your change management logs are incomplete. They are going to say you lack redundancy in the Midwest region. If you know that, you can fix it over the weekend. I cannot fix the past." "Dad," I said, "and I am not going to cheat. It is not cheating," he said, his voice rising in frustration. "It is survival. Do you think Marla Keene is playing fair? Do you think Brightline is playing fair? You are the only one following the rules, and you are going to get slaughtered for it." I looked him in the eye. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why are you trying to help me now? 2 days ago you told me to smile more." Tom looked away. He put the paper down on the counter. His hand was shaking. "I am not trying to help you win," he said quietly. "I am trying to stop you from being destroyed." He rubbed his face with both hands. "You think I am a sellout," he said. "I know you do. You think I am just a suit who repeats whatever the client wants to hear." "I didn't say that. You did not have to," he said. "And you are right." He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. I was not always like this. "Kennedy, 15 years ago? I was at Distinct Strategies. I was a senior partner. We had a client, a big pharmaceutical chain. They wanted us to validate a supply chain model that was clearly broken. It was going to lose them millions, but the VP wanted it approved because it hit his bonus targets. I waited. I had never heard this story. I refused. Tom said, "I told them the numbers were garbage." I wrote a dissent memo. I thought I was being a hero. "What happened?" I asked. "They fired me." He said, "Not immediately. They reorganized the division. They moved my team. They cut my bonus. Then, 6 months later, they let me go for performance reasons." He gave a bitter laugh. "I was 47 years old. I had a mortgage. I had your tuition coming up, and I was unemployed because I decided to be right. It took me 2 years to get back to a senior level. And when I got to Halberg, I made a promise to myself. I promised I would never be the guy who says no to the money again." He looked at me, pleading. "It is not about greed, Kennedy. It is about fear. I am terrified of being invisible again. I am terrified of losing the seat at the table. So yes, I massage the numbers. I smooth the edges. I make the client happy, because that is how you stay alive." I looked at him. For the first time, I didn't see the arrogance. I saw the trauma. He was a man who had been broken by the corporate machine, and he had rebuilt himself as a perfect, hollow cog so it could never happen again. And he wanted me to be a cog too, because cogs were safe, Dad. I said softly, "I understand." He exhaled, looking relieved. "But I am not you," I said. He stiffened. "I am not going to live in fear," I said, "and I am not going to build a company based on lies just to keep a seat at the table. If I lose, I lose. But I will lose standing up." I pushed the paper back toward him. "If you want to help me," I said, "do not give me cheat sheets. Just tell the truth. When you are in that room on Monday, just say what you actually see, not what Sterling wants you to see." Tom looked at the paper. He looked at me. "I can't," he whispered. "If I go against the firm—" "I know." I said, "It is a choice." I picked up my water bottle and walked to the door. "Think about it. Dad," I left him standing there, staring at the piece of paper that represented his safety and my integrity. I went back to my office. My computer was blinking. A Zoom request from Simon, the chairman of my board. I accepted the call. Simon was in California, sitting on a deck with the ocean in the background. He looked relaxed. I hated him for it. "Kennedy," he said, "how are you holding up?" "I am fine. Simon, we are preparing for the committee meeting." "Right, the meeting," Simon said. He took a sip of iced tea. "Listen, Kennedy, I had a call this morning from the CEO of Brightline Metric." I went still. "And?" "They are interested," Simon said. "They know about the audit. They know Redwood is shaky. They are offering a soft landing." "What does that mean?" I asked. Though I knew. "Acquisition," Simon said. "An asset purchase. They take the tech. They take the key engineers. They transition the Redwood account smoothly. And the price? It is fair," Simon said. "It is not a home run. It is barely a single. It covers the investor's principal. You walk away with maybe $200,000? After taxes? $200,000. For 7 years of my life. For the blood, the sweat, the missed weddings, the sleepless nights. But you walk away clean." Simon said, "No audit failure on your record. No public firing. You join Brightline as a VP for a year. Then you vest and leave. It is safe." "Kennedy," I looked at the screen. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. For 5 minutes, I let myself think about it. I thought about waking up on Tuesday morning without a knot in my stomach. I thought about handing the keys to Marla Keene and saying, "Fine, you win, take it." It would be relief. But then I thought about my father. If I took the deal, I was doing exactly what Tom Price would do. I was smoothing the edges. I was accepting the real job with the benefits. I was admitting that he was right, that I needed to be rescued because I played a game I couldn't win. I looked at Simon. "No," I said, "Kennedy, be practical. If this audit goes sideways on Monday, it won't." I said, "You are betting the entire company on a roll of the dice." Simon said, "I am betting it on the truth." I said, Tell Brightline to go to hell. And tell them I know about the shell company. I ended the call. My hands were shaking. I had just turned down the lifeboat. Now I had to swim. Saturday. The office was empty except for the core response team. Lila walked into my office. She looked sick. "Kennedy," she said. "I found the leak." I looked up from the binders. "How?" "We set a trap," she said. "Remember the Project Avery file we planted in the shared drive yesterday? The one that was password protected?" "Yes. It was a honeypot," she said. "We monitored who accessed it, but we also monitored LinkedIn traffic from our corporate network." She laid a screenshot on my desk. It was a message sent from an internal account to a recruiter at Brightline Metric. Recruiter: "Can you confirm the status of Project Aviary? We heard rumors of a delay." Sender: "Aviary is fake, but the Redwood renewal is dead. Marla has the knives out. If you have a spot for a senior PM, I can bring the architecture specs." I looked at the sender's name. Owen Vale. I felt a physical blow to my chest. Owen, my senior product manager. The guy who sat 3 desks away from me. The guy whose baby shower I had organized in the break room last year. He had been with me for 4 years. I trusted him. I whispered, "He is scared," Lila said. "He thinks the ship is sinking. He is trying to grab a life vest. Bring him in." I said, "He is not here. It is Saturday. Call him." I said, "Tell him we need him for the prep. Tell him it is urgent." Owen arrived an hour later. He walked in wearing a hoodie, carrying a coffee, looking like the loyal soldier he pretended to be. "Hey, boss," he said, dropping his bag. "Ready to work. What do you need?" I was sitting at the conference table. Lila stood by the door. Marcus was standing by the window, looking like a bouncer. "Sit down." "Owen," I said. He paused. He looked at Marcus. He looked at me. The smile faltered. "Is everything okay?" I slid the screenshot across the table. He looked at it. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a career ending. Owen's face went pale. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't try to deny it. The evidence was too specific. "Kennedy," he stammered, I did not send the specs. I just offered. You offered to sell our proprietary architecture to a competitor in exchange for a job interview." I said. My voice was very quiet. I was surprised by how calm I felt. It wasn't anger. It was surgery. "I have a mortgage," Owen said. His voice cracked. "I have a kid. Everyone says we are going under. Halberg is tearing us apart. Marla Keene is blocking us. I needed a backup plan." "So you helped them kill us?" I asked. "I didn't think it would matter," he cried. "I thought we were dead anyway. I was just trying to protect my family." I looked at him. I remembered my father's story. It is not about greed. It is about fear. Owen was my father. 30 years younger. He was a man deciding that loyalty was too expensive a luxury. "You are fired." "Owen," I said. "Kennedy, please." Effective immediately. I said, "Marcus will escort you to your desk to get your car keys and your phone. You will not touch your computer. Your access was revoked 10 minutes ago. Our legal counsel will be in touch regarding the NDA breach. If you speak to Brightline again, we will sue you for everything you own." Owen started to cry. It was a messy, jagged sound. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. Get him out." I said to Marcus. They walked out. I watched through the glass wall as Marcus stood over Owen while he packed his bag. I saw the other employees watching, confused, then horrified, as they realized what was happening. I felt a presence beside me. It was my father. He had come out of the inner office where he had been reviewing his objective notes. He had seen the whole thing. He looked at Owen, weeping as he was marched to the elevator. Then he looked at me. "Jesus, Kennedy," he muttered. That was cold. I turned to him. I was not cold. "Dad," I said. He looked at me, startled by the steel in my voice. "He betrayed this company." I said, "He tried to sell us out because he was scared. I am not cold. I am responsible. Responsible." The word hung in the air between us. My father looked at me, and I saw the realization hit him. He had spent his life thinking responsibility meant keeping your head down and feeding your family, even if it meant lying. I was showing him a different definition. Responsibility meant protecting the collective, even if it meant cutting off a limb. It meant leading. He swallowed hard. He looked at Owen's empty chair. "You are," he said quietly. "You are responsible." He walked away. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. Sunday night, I was alone in the office again. The binders were ready. The presentation deck was loaded. The truth file was sealed in envelopes for the committee members. My inbox pinged. It was the final agenda for the Redwood Risk Committee meeting. Date: Monday, February 9th. Time: 9 a.m. Topic: Vendor Risk Assessment. Alder and Wren Systems. Attendees: Marla Keene, Procurement; Arthur Vance, General Counsel; Marcus Vane, Security; Risk Committee Board Members. Presenter: Tom Price. Senior Engagement Lead: Halberg Partners. I stared at the name, Tom Price. It was Shakespearean. My father was the one who had to stand up at the head of the table. He was the one who had to present the findings. He was the one who had to choose. He could present the lies Sterling had written for him. The massaged numbers, the fake certificates. He could destroy me and keep his job, his safety, his identity as the man who survives. Or he could tell the truth and likely lose everything he had built for himself in his second act. I closed my laptop. I had done everything I could. I had fought the hackers, the spies, the leakers, and the lawyers. Now, it all came down to a man who had told me, to my face, that he would never say no to the money again. I turned off the lights. "See you in the morning." "Dad," I whispered. The Sunday night before the Redwood meeting. My body forgot how to sleep. It was a physical rejection of rest. I lay in my bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling, but my heart was hammering a frantic, uneven rhythm against my ribs. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boardroom. I saw the faces of the risk committee. I saw Marla Keene smiling her shark-like smile. But mostly, I heard my father's voice. It was not the voice of the man who had stood in the break room and told his colleagues to shut up. It was the voice from the dinner table. "Nobody has heard of your company. It is a nice little app. You need a real job." The anxiety was a cold, heavy stone in my stomach. It was the fear of the child who brings home a drawing to put on the fridge, only to have it tossed in the trash. I was 33 years old. I ran a company with 40 employees and millions in revenue. I had navigated complex regulatory landscapes and survived technical crises. Yet, lying there in the dark, I was terrified that even if I won, even if I walked into that room and dismantled their lies piece by piece, I would still just be a little girl begging for her father to look up from his newspaper and acknowledge she existed. I got up at 3 a.m. I paced the living room. I drank water. I tried to meditate, but my mind was a centrifuge of worst-case scenarios. What if they ignore the evidence? What if they say the timestamps are forged? What if Tom looks at me across the table and decides that his paycheck is worth more than my truth? I did not go back to sleep. I showered at 5. I put on my armor, a black suit, tailored to within an inch of its life, a white silk shirt, no jewelry. I pulled my hair back so tight it pulled at my scalp. I looked in the mirror. "You are not a daughter today." I told my reflection. "You are a CEO." I arrived at the office at 6. Peter, my general counsel, was already there. We went to the conference room. "Again," Peter said. I stood at the head of the table. "The audit findings are incorrect." I said, "Stop," Peter said. He did not look up from his notes. "You sound defensive." "I am defensive," I snapped. "They are lying about my company." "It does not matter," Peter said calmly. "If you sound angry, you lose. If you sound shrill, you lose. You are a woman in a room full of old men in banking. If you raise your voice, you become the emotional founder Marla Keene warned them about. You have to be ice." He took a sip of his coffee. "Try it again. Smile this time." I clenched my jaw. The injustice of it burned in my throat. I had to prove I was being framed, but I had to do it with a pleasant demeanor, or else the facts wouldn't count. I took a breath. I forced the corners of my mouth up. It felt unnatural. The data presented by Halberg Partners contains significant anomalies. I said. My voice was lower, slower, better. Peter said, but watch your hands. You are gripping the podium. Relax your shoulders. You are not fighting for your life. You are just clarifying a clerical error. That is the energy. Kennedy, you are helpful. You are precise. You are unbothered. We did it for 2 hours. Peter threw accusations at me. He played Marla. He played Sterling. He played my father. Your controls are immature. Ms. Price, we have concerns about your stability. This looks like a hobby business, not an enterprise partner. I answered every insult with a data point. I stripped the emotion out of my voice until I sounded like a machine. I recorded myself on my phone and played it back, listening for the tremor, the crack in the vocal cords that would give away my terror. By 8 o'clock, I was ready. I was exhausted, but I was ready. I drove to Redwood Harbor Bank. The city was gray and wet, a typical Chicago February morning. The wind whipped off the river, cutting through my coat as I walked from the parking garage to the glass tower. I saw him standing near the security turnstiles. Tom. He was wearing his best suit, a navy pinstripe that he usually saved for closing big deals. He was holding his leather folio. He looked pale. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, checking his watch every 30 seconds. When he saw me, he froze. I walked up to him. I did not smile. Hello, Dad? Kennedy, he said. He looked around the lobby, as if checking for spies. Can we talk? Just for a second? Over there? He pointed to a quiet corner near the planters, away from the flow of commuters. We walked over. He put his folio down on a bench. His hands were shaking. I watched him try to button his jacket and miss the buttonhole. I am going to throw up. He said, You will be fine. I said, It is just a meeting. It is not just a meeting, he hissed. Sterling is on a rampage. He called me at 6 this morning. He knows you requested the joint session. He knows you are up to something. He told me that if I wobble in there, if I give you an inch, he will pull me off the engagement and put me on administrative leave pending a review. He looked at me, his eyes wide and watery. They will sideline me. Kennedy, at my age, that is a death sentence. I will never get another contract. I looked at him. I saw the fear that had ruled his life for 15 years, the fear of being irrelevant, the fear of the empty calendar. So what are you going to do? I asked. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I have to present the findings, he said. The deck is already loaded. I have to read the slides. And the slides are lies. I said, The slides are interpretations, he said weakly. Kennedy, listen, if I present them, but I do it softly. If I say the risks are manageable, maybe we can find a middle ground. There is no middle ground. Dad, I said, they are trying to kill the contract. He grabbed my arm. His grip was desperate. What do you want from me? He whispered. Do you want me to blow up my career for you? Is that it? You want me to jump on a grenade so you can keep one client? I looked down at his hand on my sleeve. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was just a quiet, sad distance. No, I said. He blinked. No? I do not want you to pick me. I said, I do not want you to be my dad in there. I do not want you to save me because you love me. Then what? He asked. I want you to stop lying. I said, I pulled my arm away gently. I want you to stop lying about me. I want you to stop lying about yourself. And I want you to stop lying about what you saw in my office this week. Kennedy, if you tell the truth, I said, and it destroys my company because we actually failed, I will accept that. I will pack my boxes and go home. But if you sit in that chair and help them destroy me with a smile because you are too scared to say what is real, then I do not want to know you. Not as a father. Not as a man. I picked up my bag. Do whatever you have to do. Tom. But make sure you can live with it when the lights go out tonight. I walked to the turnstiles. I tapped my visitor badge. It beeped green. I walked through and didn't look back. The boardroom on the 42nd floor was designed to make you feel small. The table was a single slab of black walnut, 30 feet long. The view was a panoramic sweep of the lake, vast and indifferent. The players were already assembled. Marla Keene sat at the center of the long side, flanked by two junior procurement officers who looked like they had been cloned in a lab. She was wearing a red blazer, power colors. She smiled when I walked in, a tight, dismissive twitch of the lips. Arthur Vance, the general counsel, sat at the head of the table. He looked tired. Marcus Vane, the director of security, sat on the opposite side. He gave me a subtle nod. He looked like a man ready for a fistfight. And then there was the risk committee. 3 board members I had only seen in annual reports. Older men, serious men. They were checking their phones. Already bored. I took my seat. Peter sat next to me. I placed my 3 binders on the table. They made a heavy, solid thud. Halberg Partners entered last. Sterling walked in first, radiating aggressive confidence. Tom followed him. Tom looked like a ghost. He sat down across from me. He did not meet my eyes. He opened his laptop and stared at the screen. Arthur Vance cleared his throat. "Let us begin," he said. "We are here to review the vendor risk assessment for Alder and Wren Systems. I understand there are diverging views on the status of this partnership." He turned to Sterling. "Halberg, you have the floor." Sterling nodded to Tom. "Tom Price will walk us through the technical findings," Sterling said. Tom stood up. He fumbled with the clicker for the projector. The screen descended. The first slide appeared. Alder and Wren Systems. Risk profile analysis. Status: critical. Tom cleared his throat. He looked at the slide, then at the board members. He did not look at me. "Thank you." "Arthur," Tom said. His voice was steady, but mechanical. "Based on our on-site review conducted over the last 4 days, Halberg Partners has identified significant structural and operational risks within the Alder and Wren environment." He clicked the slide. A list of bullet points appeared in red text. "Primary among these," Tom read, "is a lack of maturity in control frameworks. The vendor operates with what we would classify as a startup mentality. While agile, their processes lack the rigor required for a financial institution of Redwood's size." He clicked again. "We observed founder dependency." Tom continued, "Decision-making is highly centralized. There is a lack of delegated authority. Essentially, the system relies on personalities rather than protocols." I sat there, my hands folded on the table, watching my father read the script that was written to bury me. He was doing it. He was using the words: maturity, founder dependency, personalities. It was the same language he used at the dinner table. "Nobody has heard of you. It is a nice little app." He was translating his personal disappointment in me into professional negligence. He was telling these men that I was just a girl playing shop, and that it was dangerous to let me handle their money. I felt something inside me snap, but it wasn't a break. It was a hardening. For years, I had thought that if I just built a big enough company, if I just made enough money, if I just got enough important clients, he would finally respect me. I thought success was the currency I needed to buy his love. I looked at him now, a graying man in a suit, reading lies off a PowerPoint because he was afraid of his boss, and I realized the truth. I could be the President of the United States, and he would still think I was unqualified, because his dismissal wasn't about my competence, it was about his insecurity. He needed me to be small so he could feel big. The realization washed over me like cold water. I didn't need him to believe in me. I just needed to beat him. Tom finished the presentation. "Therefore," he said, his voice trailing off slightly at the end, "Halberg recommends a transition to a more established vendor to mitigate operational risk." He sat down. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. Sterling leaned forward. "Thank you. Tom, as you can see, gentlemen, the risk is untenable. We suggest moving to the RFP finalist, Brightline Metric, immediately." Arthur Vance turned to me. "Ms. Price," he said, "you requested this session to present a counter view. You have 10 minutes. I stood up. I did not use the podium. I stood behind my chair. I placed my hand on the first binder. "Thank you, Arthur," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice I had practiced. No tremor, no anger, just facts. "I have listened to the presentation from Halberg Partners," I continued, "and while the narrative is compelling, it suffers from one fatal flaw." I opened the binder. "It is entirely fabricated." Marla Keene scoffed. A loud, sharp sound. "Arthur," she said, "are we really going to listen to this?" This is exactly what I meant about maturity. She is unable to accept feedback. I ignored her. I looked directly at the risk committee chair, a man named Henderson. "Mr. Henderson." I said, "Slide 4 of the Halberg deck claims our encryption protocols are outdated. They provided a screenshot as evidence." I held up a document. This is the original log file from which that screenshot was taken, as you can see from the metadata. The file is dated October 14th, 2023. It is 2 years old. It is from a decommissioned server. I slid the document down the table toward Henderson. "Slide 6 claims we lack redundancy in the Midwest region." I said, I held up another document. "This is our current architecture diagram, verified by Amazon Web Services this morning. We have triple redundancy across 3 availability zones. Halberg was provided with this document on Tuesday. They chose to omit it." Henderson picked up the document. He frowned. "Sterling," he said, looking at the Halberg boss, "why are we looking at 2-year-old data?" Sterling stiffened. "We used the data provided by the vendor." Sterling said, "If they gave us old files, that is on them. I did not give you old files," I said smoothly, "and I can prove it." I pointed to Marcus Vane. "Marcus," I said, "can you confirm the status of our current API gateway?" Marcus leaned forward. He looked delighted to be unleashed. "Mr. Chair," Marcus said, "Alder & Wren is the most stable vendor we have. I monitor their traffic personally. The instability Halberg claims, it does not exist. My team has 0 tickets open with them. 0. Marla Keene slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Marcus, you are not a risk auditor. You are security. You do not understand the broader business context." The context. I cut in, my voice sharpening just a fraction. "Is that you are trying to replace a performing vendor with a failing one?" Marla turned on me. Her eyes were venomous. "Be careful. Kennedy," she warned, "you are making accusations of impropriety against bank leadership. That is a breach of your contract right there. You are flailing. You are emotional." I looked at her. I smiled. It was the smile Peter had taught me. "I am not emotional. Marla, I am thorough." I opened the second binder. "You claim the review was triggered by an anonymous tip regarding a data breach." I said, "A tip received last Monday." I held up a sheet of paper. "This is the WHOIS registration for the email domain that sent the tip. https://w.google.com/search !Q equals watchdog -intel -group.com. It was registered 2 months ago by a shell entity. I held up a second sheet. And this is the corporate filing for that shell entity. It lists a registered agent. That agent is Prism Communications. I looked at the board. Prism Communications is the PR firm of record for Brightline Metric. The room went dead silent. The board members stopped checking their phones. Henderson took off his glasses. I continued. "Relentless. And yesterday, we terminated a senior employee, Owen Vale, for gross misconduct." I opened the third binder. This is a signed statement from Mr. Vale. In it, he admits to leaking confidential architecture documents to Marla Keene's office, under the impression that he was securing a job interview with Brightline Metric. I slid the statement down the table. It landed in front of Marla. She stared at it, her face draining of color. "You have a mole?" Henderson asked, his voice low. "We had a mole," I corrected. "He has been removed, but he confirmed that the audit was a formality. The decision to switch to Brightline was made 3 weeks ago." Marla stood up. "This is entrapment. she said, her voice rising. "This is a disgruntled employee making things up. I have never spoken to this Owen Vale." I looked at her. "Then why is his number in your call logs?" I asked. I didn't have her call logs, of course, but she didn't know that, and the fear in her eyes told everyone I was right. "I have one final piece of evidence," I said. I turned to the last tab in the binder. This was the twist, the one Simon, my board chair, had given me by accident when he tried to get me to sell. Brightline Metric approached my board on Saturday with an acquisition offer. I said, they wanted to buy Alder and Wren for pennies on the dollar to facilitate a soft landing. I held up the term sheet, Clause 42. I read, "The acquired entity must issue a public press release attributing the transition of the Redwood Harbor Bank account to unforeseen security vulnerabilities." I lowered the paper. They didn't just want the contract. Gentlemen, they wanted to destroy our reputation to justify the switch. They wanted me to confess to sins I didn't commit, so that their pricing would look like a safety premium. I looked at Tom. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. He hadn't known about the acquisition offer. He hadn't known about the clause. He looked horrified. He realized, finally, what he was part of. He wasn't just a consultant. He was a gravedigger. I turned back to Henderson. "This was not a risk assessment," I said. "It was a corporate assassination, and Halberg Partners provided the weapon." Henderson looked at the documents spread out on the walnut table. He looked at the encryption logs. He looked at the shell company registration. He looked at Owen Vale's confession. He turned slowly to look at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," Henderson said. His voice was very quiet, which made it terrifying. Sterling was sweating. He wiped his forehead. "Mr. Chairman, obviously we were not aware of these external factors. We conducted a neutral review based on the data provided." "The data provided," Henderson repeated. He looked at the first binder, the one with the real logs. "Ms. Price claims you used outdated logs to manufacture a finding of negligence. Is that true?" Sterling stammered. There may have been version control issues. As I said, the vendor..." Henderson cut him off. He turned to Tom. "Mr. Price," Henderson said. Tom jumped. "You are the engagement lead." Henderson said, "You signed the report. You stood there 5 minutes ago and told us their encryption was outdated." Henderson pointed a finger at Tom. "Did you verify the timestamps on those files? Did you check the source? Or did you just paste what you were given into a slide deck?" The room waited. I looked at my father. This was it. The moment. He could lie. He could say he verified them. He could say I was lying. He could try to protect Halberg. Or he could tell the truth. Tom looked at Sterling. Sterling was glaring at him. A silent command to hold the line. Then Tom looked at me. I wasn't looking at him with pleading eyes. I was looking at him with that same hard clarity I had found earlier. "I don't need you to save me. I just need you to stop lying." Tom looked down at his hands. "Mr. Chairman," Tom said. His voice was shaking. "We asked for the raw source materials." Henderson said, "Do you have them? Can you validate your findings right now, or can't you?" Tom closed his eyes for a second. Then he opened them. I cannot validate them," Tom whispered. "Speak up." Henderson barked. "I cannot validate them," Tom said. Louder. He pushed his laptop away. The data in the deck was provided to me by the project leadership. Tom said, "I asked for the original source files from the vendor, but I was told it wasn't necessary." Sterling turned on him. "Tom, what the hell are you doing?" Tom stood up. He looked at Henderson. "I did not verify the timestamps." Tom said, "I should have, but I didn't. I relied on the excerpts provided to me. And looking at what Ms. Price has presented." He looked at me. "I believe our report is flawed." The room erupted. Marla Keene started shouting something about incompetence. Sterling was yelling at Tom. Arthur Vance was calling for order. I sat perfectly still in the center of the chaos. I had won. But as I watched my father stand there, looking broken and small while his boss screamed at him, I didn't feel triumph. I felt the heavy, quiet weight of being the only adult in the room. The silence in the boardroom was not empty. It was heavy. suffocating, and pressurized. It was the kind of silence that precedes an explosion. Henderson, the chair of the risk committee, was still staring at my father. He was waiting for a validation that Tom had just admitted he could not give. Sterling, the head of the Halberg team, stood up. He buttoned his jacket, a nervous, reflexive tick. "Mr. Chairman," Sterling said, his voice smooth but slightly too loud, "we are getting bogged down in technical minutiae. The role of Halberg Partners is to assess the aggregate risk posture. We cannot disclose specific proprietary methodologies regarding our data sourcing due to client confidentiality agreements." He was stonewalling. He was throwing up a wall of corporate jargon to hide the fact that his team had been caught using falsified evidence. Henderson slowly took off his glasses. He placed them on the walnut table. "Confidentiality," Henderson repeated. He looked at Sterling like he was a stain on the carpet. "You are telling me that you cannot show me the source of the data because it is confidential?" "Mr. Sterling, we are the client. We own the data. There are third-party agreements." Sterling stammered. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand was sweeping past the 12. This was the edge. If Sterling managed to talk his way out of this, if he managed to convince Henderson that this was just a difference of opinion rather than fraud, Redwood would default to the path of least resistance. They would execute the safe exit. They would fire us anyway, just to avoid the headache. I felt a cold bead of sweat slide down my spine. I had played every card. I had exposed the lie. But in corporate America, the lie is often more comfortable than the truth. Sterling turned to Tom. He didn't speak, but the look on his face was a scream. It was a glare of absolute command. "Shut up. Sit down. Get back in line." Tom looked at Sterling. Then he looked at the table. His hands were gripping the edge of the wood so hard his knuckles were yellow. Then, slowly, he lifted his head and looked at me. I braced myself. I expected him to look at me with that familiar pity, the look that said, "I am sorry, honey, but this is how the real world works." I expected him to plead for my understanding as he threw me under the bus to save his pension. But he wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at me with something else. He saw my face. I wasn't crying. I wasn't begging. I wasn't looking at him like a daughter needing her daddy to fix a broken toy. I was looking at him like a CEO watching a vendor fail to deliver. I was steady. I was complete. For the first time in 33 years, Tom Price realized that I did not need him. I did not need his approval. I did not need his protection. I only needed the truth not to be buried in a shallow grave. He took a breath. It was a ragged, shuddering sound. "Mr. Chairman," Tom said. Sterling put a hand on Tom's shoulder. It looked like a friendly gesture, but I knew he was digging his thumb into my father's trapezius muscle. "Tom, let us take this offline," Sterling hissed. Tom shrugged the hand off. He stood up straighter. "Mr. Chairman," Tom said, his voice louder this time, "I cannot claim confidentiality. The excerpts in the Halberg report, the screenshots of the outdated logs, the missing certificates, they were not gathered by my team. The room went dead still. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. They were provided to us." Tom said, "By the office of the Vice President of Procurement." Marla Keene made a noise that sounded like a gasp strangled in her throat. Tom continued, his voice shaking, but gaining momentum. "I requested the original source files from the vendor on Tuesday to validate the claims. I was told by my leadership that the client had already performed the validation and that relitigating it would be inefficient." He looked at Sterling, then back at Henderson. "I relied on data that I did not verify." Tom said, "And seeing the evidence Ms. Price has presented today, specifically the timestamps and the independent logs, it is clear that the profile we built is fundamentally inaccurate." He paused. He looked at me. "I cannot ethically recommend replacing Alder and Wren based on this evidence," he said. "To do so would be a breach of my fiduciary duty to this bank." He sat down. He looked like a man who had just cut his own lifeline. The room did not stay silent. It erupted. Marla Keene stood up. her chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is absurd," she shouted. "He is confused. He is covering for his own incompetence." Arthur Vance was whispering furiously to the board members. The risk committee members were leaning in, talking over each other. Sterling was typing frantically on his phone, his face a mask of red fury. It was chaos. It was the sound of a carefully constructed narrative collapsing under the weight of a single truth. I did not join the noise. I did not gloat. I did not point a finger at Marla and say, "I told you so." I reached into my bag and pulled out the final packet. It was sealed with tamper-evident tape. "Mr. Henderson," I said. My voice cut through the shouting. Henderson held up a hand. The room quieted down, though the tension remained electric. "Ms. Price?" he said. I slid the packet down the long table. "This is the truth file," I said. "It contains everything, but specifically, it contains the results of a gray box penetration test conducted by Ironclad Security. They attacked our systems for the last 48 hours. Marla stared at the packet like it was a bomb. They found 0 critical vulnerabilities. I said, and they confirmed that the breach reported by the anonymous tip was technically impossible given our architecture. I looked at Marla. The packet also contains a timeline. I said, it correlates the registration of the anonymous tipster's domain with the private calendar meetings between procurement and Brightline Metric. Arthur Vance picked up the packet. He weighed it in his hand. "Marla," Vance said. His voice was cold. "Did you meet with Brightline Metric prior to the audit?" Marla opened her mouth. She looked at Sterling. She looked at Henderson. She looked for an exit, but there were no doors she could open. I have industry relationships," she stammered. "That is my job. To know the market." Vance did not reply. He turned to Henderson. "Mr. Chairman," Vance said, "I am advising the committee to suspend all decisions regarding vendor transition immediately." Henderson nodded. He looked grim. "Agreed," Henderson said. He turned to the stenographer in the corner. "Let the record show that the Risk Committee is ordering a formal internal investigation into the procurement conduct regarding the Alder and Wren contract." He turned to me. "Ms. Price," he said, "your contract is safe, for now." I nodded. "Thank you. However," Henderson continued, "given the noise surrounding this account, we cannot simply return to business as usual. Alder and Wren will continue service, but under heightened monitoring, we will require weekly logs and bi-weekly syncs with security until the investigation is concluded." "I understand," I said. "We welcome the scrutiny." Henderson stood up. "This meeting is adjourned." He said, "Halberg, please remain in the room." The dismissal was absolute. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. The adrenaline that had held me upright for 5 days was draining away, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. I gathered my binders. I felt Peter, my general counsel, pat me on the back, but I couldn't feel his hand. I was numb. I walked out of the boardroom. The hallway was quiet, a stark contrast to the violence of the meeting. The view of the lake was still gray, still indifferent. I walked toward the elevators. I just wanted to go outside. I wanted to breathe air that hadn't been recycled through a corporate HVAC system. "Kennedy." I stopped. I didn't turn around immediately. I knew the voice. I turned slowly. Tom was standing by the door of the conference room. He had been dismissed early, it seemed. Sterling was likely still inside, getting flayed alive. Tom looked older than he had an hour ago. His posture, usually so upright and salesmanlike, was slumped. He held his leather folio with both hands, like a shield. He walked toward me. He stopped 5 feet away. "You were incredible in there," he said. I looked at him. I didn't say anything. "I mean it." He said, "The way you had the data ready, the way you handled Marla, I have never seen anyone dismantle a room like that. Not even the senior partners." He took a step closer. He offered a tentative, hopeful smile. "I am proud of you." "Kennedy," he said, "I really am. I didn't realize you had that in you." I felt a sharp, hot sting behind my eyes. Tears. I hated them. I hated that even now, after everything. His approval still had the power to make me cry, but I did not let them fall. I blinked them back. "You didn't realize," I repeated. "No." He said, "I thought, well, you know what I thought. But I was wrong. You are the real deal." He spread his hands, as if offering me a gift, as if his pride was the prize I had been fighting for. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sat at my dinner table for years and made me feel small. I looked at the man who had told me to smile more while he helped people destroy my life. I stepped forward. "Dad," I said softly. "Yeah?" he said, his smile widening. "Pride is not a gift when it arrives after you tried to take everything," I said. His smile faltered. It hung on his face for a second, then slid off. "Kennedy, that is not fair," he said. "I just saved you. I stood up for you. You stood up for yourself." I said, "You stood up because you realized that if you didn't, you would be liable for fraud. You didn't do it for me. You did it because you were cornered." "That is not true," he protested. "I looked at you. I saw you. You saw that I was winning." I said, "And you wanted to be on the winning side. That is what you do. Dad, you survive." I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. "I appreciate what you did in there." I said, "Truly, you told the truth. That is all I asked for. But do not expect me to hug you for it. You were the one holding the shovel until 5 minutes ago." Tom looked stricken. He looked like I had punched him. "Kennedy," he said, "we are family." "I know," I said. "That is why it hurts." I turned to go. I needed to leave before I broke down. I needed to be the CEO for 10 more minutes. "Kennedy, wait." There was a panic in his voice now, a real, sharp edge of fear. I stopped. I turned back. "What?" He looked down at his phone. He held it up. The screen was black. "They locked me out." He whispered. "What?" "My email." He said, "My Halberg account. It is gone. Sterling must have messaged HR the second the meeting ended." He looked up at me, his eyes wide and terrified. "They are going to fire me. Kennedy. For bias. For going against the client. They are going to say I was compromised because you are my daughter." I stared at him. It was happening. The thing he feared most. The erasure. He took a step toward me. I cannot go back to the office," he said. "They will have security waiting, and I cannot go home. Your mother. If I tell her I lost the job." He swallowed. "Can I come with you?" he asked. "Just for a while? Just until I figure this out? I can help you with the transition. I can help you with the monitoring logs. I know what they are looking for." I looked at him. My father, the successful consultant, the man who measured worth in titles. He was standing in a hallway, locked out of his email, asking his daughter, the one with the hobby business, for a place to go. It was the ultimate reversal. It was the moment I should have relished. But I didn't relish it. I just felt a deep, aching sadness. My whole life, I had been learning how not to need him. I had built my company, my resilience, my entire identity around the fact that I had to do it alone because he wouldn't help me, and now he needed me. I hesitated. I thought about the office. I thought about the team waiting for me. I thought about Owen, who I had fired for betrayal. Could I bring him back? Could I let him into my world? I looked at his shaking hands. I couldn't leave him in the hallway. He was my father. "Come on," I said quietly. He let out a breath. "Thank you. Thank you. Kennedy, do not help me," I said sharply. "Do not offer to consult. Do not touch the logs. Do not tell me how to run the monitoring." I pressed the elevator button. "You can sit in the lobby," I said. "You can drink the coffee. But you are not on the team. You are a visitor. Do you understand?" He nodded. "I understand." The elevator arrived. We stepped in. The doors closed, sealing us in the quiet box. We stood side by side, father and daughter, strangers again, riding the silence down to the street. When I walked back into Alder and Wren, the office was silent. Every face was turned toward the door. 40 people, engineers, support staff. Sales reps. They were standing at their desks. They looked tired. They looked scared. They saw me walk in. They saw my father trailing behind me, looking lost and stripped of his power. I walked to the center of the room. I put my bag down on a desk. I looked at Lila. I looked at Marcus. I looked at the empty desk where Owen used to sit. "We are still standing," I said. A collective exhale went through the room. It wasn't a cheer. It was the sound of air returning to lungs that hadn't breathed in a week. "The contract is safe," I said. "The investigation is open. Marla Keene is being looked at by legal." A few people smiled. Lila closed her eyes and leaned against the wall, but I continued, my voice firm. "This is not a party." I looked around the room. We won, but we took damage. We lost trust. We lost a key employee. And we are going to be under a microscope for the next 6 months. Redwood is going to watch every packet, every log, every commit. I walked toward the whiteboard. I picked up a marker. I erased the chaotic diagram of the attack. "Starting today," I said, "we are implementing a new information security policy. Zero trust. No more shared drives. No more loose permissions. We are going to lock this place down so tight that even a ghost couldn't get in." I turned to them. "I know you are tired," I said. "I know this week was hell. But you proved something. You proved that competence is the only defense that matters. You proved that when they come for us with lies, we can beat them with the truth." I looked at my father. He was sitting on the orange sofa in the reception area, holding a cup of coffee, watching me. He looked small. He looked like a guest, but he was watching me. And for the first time, he wasn't looking at a potential failure. He was looking at the CEO. "Get back to work," I said. I walked into my office and closed the door. I sat down in my chair. I looked at the view of the city. I was tired. I was lonely. I had a father who was broken and a company that was wounded. But the phone on my desk was silent. The email alerts had stopped. The panic was gone. I took a deep breath. I opened my laptop. I had a company to run. "Thank you for listening to My Dad Said Nobody's Heard of Your Company." Then he walked into our lobby. This story was a journey through the high-stakes world of corporate betrayal and the complex, painful dynamics of family. Kennedy Price's victory wasn't just about saving her business. It was about saving herself from the need for validation that can keep us small. I would love to hear your thoughts on Kennedy's decision at the end. Did she make the right call letting her father come back to the office, even just as a visitor? Or should she have left him in the hallway? Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, grit, and the sweet taste of winning when the odds are stacked against you. Until next time, keep your logs clean and your head high.